Cześć, słuchasz podcastu Bluz Brothers.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Bluz Brothers podcast series where we discuss artificial intelligence. I'm Karol, the COO and Delivery Director at Insperity, and my today guest is Adrian.
Hi, I'm Adrian, and I'm a front-end developer at Insperity.
I'd also like to mention that Adrian is an AI enthusiast, which is why we're having this conversation today. Why did we decide to record this podcast? Well, primarily because some time ago, Adrian gave a presentation during a microphone test at our internal event where we give our team members the opportunity to present. He delivered a lecture about artificial intelligence with the thesis that AI will replace us, the programmers. Later on, Adrian recorded another podcast, the first in a series about artificial intelligence, discussing how the world will change after the integration of AI in various aspects of life. This wasn't just about development. It also included music, content creation, graphics, marketing, film, and advertising. And this topic is currently very much in the spotlight. Many people are talking about it. Many people are writing about it. However, in this specific episode, we want to focus on how artificial intelligence will impact us as programmers on the IT world. Adrian, let me start with a spoiler alert right at the beginning. Should we as programmers, developers, engineers be afraid of artificial intelligence?
Yes. And let's treat that as a thesis we'll try to defend in this podcast.
Okay, let's do that. Now, Adrian, each of us associates artificial intelligence with the GPT chatbot, since it has been quite prominent since its introduction. However, we know that it's just one piece of a larger puzzle. There are various AIs and models out there, and ChatGPT allows non-technical individuals, non-scientists, to communicate with other artificial intelligence models in a simple way. Could you tell me, what can artificial intelligence do already? What tools can we as developers utilize?
Recently, Stack Overflow released some interesting statistics, which they do annually, and this year's report has a section on AI. Surprisingly, the most popular tool, as one might expect, is GitHub Copilot. Of course, we're talking about developers here. Almost every developer I know has heard of GitHub Copilot and similarly ChatGPT, but as you mentioned, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are more and more tools emerging. Besides GitHub Copilot, there's Tab9, AWS, and Whisper, all similar tools that assist in code suggestions. We also have chatbots like ChatGPT and its derivatives. As I mentioned, there are more and more of them. Recently, GitHub Labs also appeared, an IDE extension with various cool features such as writing tests. It includes an embedded chat that understands the entire context of your project and can answer questions like how a specific fragment works. It's still in the experimental phase, but it's expected to be released as GitHub Copilot X. However, above all, AI excels at generating algorithms. Just recently I had a cool internal project where I had to write tree algorithms, something many might remember, and AI performed incredibly well in this task. Apart from generating code, AI is excellent for learning new technologies. You can use AI chatbots as interactive documentation. By the way, a lot of documentation for popular technologies is integrated into these chats, and you can interact with them, ensuring the information they provide aligns with the documentation. Definitely for testing, code transcription, task automation. As developers, we're also writing a lot of emails these days, and AI is helpful there as well, and there's probably much more to come with even more advancements in the future.
Okay, thanks. So in summary, apart from just writing code, generating boilerplate or algorithms, AI can also help us with other tasks that developers perform daily. But tell me, what's still missing? What can't AI do yet? What are the challenges that we as programmers need to solve on a daily basis?
One of the first AI challenges that comes to mind is, of course, security and privacy. It's a fairly prominent topic right now, but I wouldn't want to dwell on it too much, as it could probably be a separate episode in itself. But in terms of things that these code generators struggle with, it's primarily abstraction and architecture. We need to remember that a developer nowadays is not just someone who types away at a keyboard. It used to be like that. Today you have to attend meetings, communicate with people, plan, and when it comes to things beyond that, AI often generates solutions that are outdated or have security issues. But in my opinion, one of the most significant problems at the moment, especially when it comes to initial collaboration with AI in code, is that AI doesn't perform very well in large, complex solutions or big projects. It's quite good at, for example, starting new projects, creating functions, components, and so on using GitHub Copilot. It excels in those scenarios. However, in very large projects, it gets a bit more challenging. The thesis is that as the project size and complexity increase, AI's performance decreases. And it doesn't matter whether this law is named after me or not, as it will probably become outdated quite quickly. I believe that ultimately this trend will reverse because computers have greater computational power. They can process more than a human. So it's likely that AI will understand our projects better than we do, even though we might have written the code ourselves. The same will apply to the other problems I mentioned: security issues or outdated solutions. For instance, GitHub Copilot X is set to be released soon, and along with Copilot X, other solutions will emerge, such as super interactive documentation, something like the search engine that Microsoft recently showcased. We can ask it about technical terms and have 100% certainty that the chat's responses are accurate. It also references documentation and provides examples, so these problems are regularly being addressed. I think everything I mentioned will disappear in the not-so-distant future.
Okay, so it's reassuring to know that AI won't replace us in client conversations or attending meetings, at least not for now. There are these challenges you mentioned, issues of complexity where AI doesn't perform quite well yet. However, in my opinion, it's only a matter of time. With the introduction of Copilot X, its creators declare that this complexity problem will indeed be resolved, and then artificial intelligence will surely be able to handle, search, find, or grasp context in much larger projects than a human brain can. Now, Adrian, could you tell me how you, as a programmer at Inspirity, use AI in your daily work?
While I do use GitHub Copilot, to be honest, in my project, specifically in my case, it's not very helpful in the sense that I don't accept a lot of its suggestions. However, even small, simple things like code snippets, completing functions, suggesting syntax that already leads to an increase in productivity. I can't even remember the last time I wrote tests without AI's help. It's great for unit tests, for smaller, less complex components, and even for more complex ones, it does quite well. As I mentioned earlier, algorithms are something I don't remember writing recently. However, as a front-end developer, I don't often deal with complex algorithms. There are situations where it's necessary, and AI does a great job there too. In terms of other solutions not directly related to code generation, for example, chatbots like ChatGPT or its derivatives, I use them for summarizing task descriptions, drafting emails. It's fantastic for code documentation or task automation. Task automation is a broad topic. AI can do a great job at it. For instance, not too long ago, and forgive me if I mentioned this in the previous podcast, I experimented with a cool solution named Barden. With it, I instructed specific AIs to access my Jira, retrieve all my tasks, and generate summaries for my Notion, which I could then send to clients. It was part of a test, but it just shows the huge potential and what can be achieved.
Indeed, there are many applications. I mostly use ChatGPT for creating emails and various types of content. You can input a few simple words or a basic note and receive well-crafted content, which you can then refine as needed. However, what I find interesting is a recent conversation I had with our colleague Adrian, the front-end team leader at Inspirity. I asked him how much AI currently speeds up his work. He mentioned that depending on the project or task type, his productivity increases by 20 to 30%. So hypothetically speaking, from my managerial perspective, if we have a team of 5 people and each of them increases their productivity by 20 to 30% using AI, we could argue that one person becomes redundant. We could potentially let go of one team member and have them say, why should I work in this team when there's another team that accomplished the same thing as our 5-person team yesterday? Of course, that's not how it works in practice, as AI won't engage with clients, attend meetings, break complex tasks into smaller subtasks, allocate resources, etc. But I think it highlights a trend that AI is speeding up our work, which will undoubtedly impact teams, individuals, and how we work. I recently read an interview with GitHub CEO Thomas Dohmke, who shared some interesting numbers about GitHub Copilot. Currently, over 10,000 different companies and organizations are using the paid license for GitHub Copilot. Within Microsoft alone, it's over 30,000 users, Microsoft employees, who use GitHub Copilot daily. And GitHub Copilot, not everyone might be aware, has statistics embedded in it. It tracks when users accept its code suggestions. Currently, the code generated by GitHub Copilot accounts for 46% of the total code in projects used by these users. To me, that's a substantial number and quite surprising. Thomas predicts that soon we'll reach the mythical 80% mark, where 80% of the code will be generated by AI, leaving us as programmers to focus on the remaining 20%, the most challenging part that takes up the most time. AI will take care of the rest. Adrian, what are your thoughts on this? As someone who has been closely following the development of GitHub Copilot from the very beginning, as you were an alpha tester for the tool and you work with it, track its progress. How long do you think it will take to reach the point where 80% of the code is truly generated by AI?
I'd rather not provide specific numbers. I've been wrong quite often, so I'd rather spare myself that this time. However, the fact is that we will be writing less code, whether we like it or not. That's just a fact. Regarding those numbers and statistics you mentioned, I think it's important to understand that the 46% or 80% doesn't mean we'll be doing 80% less work. It depends on what that code is. Most likely, the code generated by AI is mostly boilerplate. The remaining 20% is crucial, and that's where we invest the most time. Now, let's go back for a moment to that minor digression you made earlier. The Adrian you mentioned at the beginning, that's not me. It's a similar name, and he's also a front-end developer, but it's not me. And as for the 20 to 30% increase in productivity and the theoretical notion of replacing one person in a team, I think it's important to note that, as you said, a developer's job is not just typing code. I used to think I'd go to a software house and just write code. Now I find myself recording podcasts. However, with the right setup, those numbers are definitely achievable. By the right setup, I mean leveraging the full potential of available tools. Let me provide an example. With today's technology, we can already generate summaries from conversations. The Teams application is currently being deployed with solutions that can be integrated with Zoom. It's a tool that listens to your conversation and creates summaries from it. It's excellent for tasks like recruitment. You focus solely on the candidate while I generate a note for you to send to HR. That's genuine time saving. As for the development of GitHub Copilot, yes, it has progressed. But I believe the biggest progress will be visible now, perhaps as you're listening, considering the release of Copilot X. With Copilot X, we'll have a full-fledged tool that's not just an assistant in writing code, but a knowledgeable entity that can answer specific questions about our code. You can think of it as interactive documentation for your code.
Absolutely. So the development of GitHub Copilot indicates that the work of programmers will undoubtedly change permanently. The question is, how will this work look? Will we only be using AI tools and writing specific queries to get the desired answers? Or will it look different? What do you think?
I think it's a very exciting topic, and I'm glad I live in times where I can witness this. As I mentioned earlier, we'll undoubtedly be writing less and less code. Since AI can generate code for us and eliminate the mundane parts like boilerplate and repetitive code, we can focus on more interesting tasks, and we should do that. I believe that's how it will look. But I have a theory that AI will lower the entry barrier into programming because we have a concept called pseudocode. There might come a time when we won't even need to write actual code anymore. In my opinion, a programmer, at least to some extent, is not just someone who types code. They are problem solvers. That's the most important skill they can possess. Through pseudocode, we can solve problems. It could look like writing solutions to problems in simple sentences in English, for instance, and AI would generate code from that. Our only task would be to review the code.
That's an interesting perspective. I have a theory and vision that in the future, whether near or distant, our work as programmers will resemble that of an architect, a senior developer, or an analyst who reviews code for artificial intelligence. We write good task descriptions, user stories, break them down into small enough pieces that AI can handle, and then we do code reviews similar to how we do code reviews between programmers. However, this might be a bit further into the future. But for now, I think crucial skills for programmers are understanding how things work, how to break certain things down into smaller pieces that AI can generate code for, how to write queries to get the desired code, and of course, how to verify if what we got is what we truly need. However, you raised an interesting point about making it easier for newcomers to enter the IT field. I have a slightly different observation. I believe that it's already quite challenging for juniors to enter the world of IT. Everywhere you see job postings that require programmers with at least 2 years of experience. Young programmers go on various internships, participate in academies organized by companies, and try to gain experience. Now, with tools like Copilot, it might become even harder for junior developers, as these tools are capable of generating better code than a junior could. I remember a year ago when Copilot was first introduced, you showed us examples of university exam tasks that Copilot solved effortlessly. So why would companies hire junior developers if AI can do the same tasks faster, better, and for free?
I partially agree because I agree that juniors have it tough. The abundance and vastness of technology can be overwhelming. I remember when I started programming and wanted to become a web developer, even before the division into front-end and back-end, we learned jQuery. We didn't even learn JavaScript. Many people didn't even know what it was. If you wanted to learn JavaScript, you simply learned jQuery, and that was it. You created websites, later learned PHP, and everything was fine. Now we have numerous frameworks, various technologies. A new JavaScript framework seems to pop up every few weeks, along with new solutions for styling. Now we're adding AI to the mix. But when talking about AI lowering the entry barrier to programming, I meant something slightly different. I was referring to AI changing the entry barrier. AI won't solve our problem with the sheer number of technologies, but it will solve the problem of actually writing code. It's similar to the case of integrated development environments and IDEs. In the past, coding wasn't as pleasant as it is now with these colorful IDEs that highlight symbols, and we have built-in compilers. I remember. In the past, we wrote code in a terminal, a black and white screen, and it took ages to set up a compiler. Later, IDEs appeared along with code hinting tools that helped us catch errors. We were already able to detect many errors while writing code, and in my opinion, that lowered the entry barrier without a doubt. Similarly, with higher level languages, as a front-end developer, I don't have to worry too much about memory allocation or how my garbage collector works. Although one should know these things, they're important. My point was that AI will change the entry barrier. As for juniors and how they should use AI or whether they should at all, do you have any thoughts on that?
It seems to me that everything you're saying makes a lot of sense, as it will become easier for them to generate code since AI will do it for them. However, for a junior developer, it will be very, very difficult to determine whether the code makes sense, whether it's good, safe, or if it does exactly what the client expects from them. And it appears to me, as I mentioned earlier, that the role of a programmer will become more of an analyst, a senior architect, who performs code reviews. Ultimately, a junior developer doing code reviews could be a ticking time bomb.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. The fact that we'll be writing less code doesn't mean we won't need to learn it, because after all, even if AI generates 80% of the code, we still need to be able to check and verify it. Let's say someone enters the field of IT, wants to learn programming, and has one tool at their disposal, an AI chatbot that learns based on what it spits out. As we've established earlier, this chatbot isn't infallible and often provides answers with errors. Therefore, in my opinion, such a person should primarily, absolutely utilize AI. If something can improve your work, you should use it. To me, it's a no-brainer. But when it comes to learning programming, you should first grasp the fundamentals in order to at least verify what AI provides for us.
All right, so to sum up, the role of a junior developer will certainly change. On the one hand, it will become easier, but on the other hand, it will become more difficult to perform accurate code reviews. I suspect that the role of a junior developer, as we know it now, who writes code and learns from seniors, will somewhat be eliminated. So we won't have juniors, we'll have mids. However, over time, these mid-level developers will become seniors. The question is, if we don't have juniors and mid-level developers become seniors, will there be a gap? Do you think that entering the IT field, truly being a programmer rather than just a user of AI tools, will now start from the mid-level?
Well, that would make sense. If there are no juniors, there won't be mids. If there are no mids, there won't be seniors. And then what? I think it depends. It highly depends on the company, because in my opinion, if a company is aware, it doesn't hire juniors solely for them to code, as they tend to produce average code, even decent juniors. They hire them to train them, to propel them upwards as quickly as possible, and to make them better. However, now that I think about it, companies that focus more on having juniors tackle tasks that no one else wants to touch might just get rid of such individuals. After all, intermediates and seniors who use AI will be able to do the job much faster and at a lower cost, and probably better. But as we established, juniors aren't meant to be doing things nobody else wants to do. They're here to lift them up, to make them better eventually.
I really like your response because I share the same perspective and thoughts. Another thing that comes to mind is whether AI can create something new. Many people argue that AI has been trained on what we have on the internet. And if over time more and more of the content AI learns from is generated by AI itself, will it not lead to AI consuming its own tail, essentially feeding models with what they've generated? Could this potentially cause the development of AI to halt at some point?
What you mentioned is actually the definition of model overfitting, which isn't a new topic because AI has been with us for several decades. Model overfitting occurs when a model becomes too adapted to the training data, making it less flexible, which in turn makes it difficult for the model to predict the next step accurately. And speaking of the next steps, would you explain how the concept of next step probability works?
Exactly. Here's a very interesting point. If we understand how models like large language models or diffusion models work, which we utilize, they don't function by having a library of code snippets underneath and trying to understand what the user wants, inserting the best fitting code snippet. Instead, they employ massive neural networks with trillions of parameters. These neural networks predict what the next step will be. In the case of the language models, they predict the next word and insert the next word, foreseeing what the next word might be. It's very easy to visualize this with diffusion models, where we can ask AI to generate an impressionistic style image of New York City. Obviously, New York City didn't exist in that style back then, and nobody was generating such images. However, AI generates an image in that style. So, in the case of diffusion models, these neural networks predict pixel by pixel how the image should look. This means we can say that yes, AI creates something new with each query. It doesn't provide us with something it has seen, prepared, saved in a library, and gives us a pre-made code snippet. Instead, it creates it essentially from scratch. Therefore, in my opinion, yes, it can create something new, and it will continue to do so. Now, one final question. Do you already see places where we must use AI, practically having no choice but to do so? Are there areas where the human brain can't handle certain tasks, or where addressing these tasks manually would take a very, very, very long time compared to assigning them to artificial intelligence?
Yes, I believe there are several such domains. I think writing algorithms, for instance, many people are primarily focused on that, but also analyzing trends, drawing conclusions from data, or even using AI to decipher ancient scripts that haven't been deciphered yet. And similarly, we can think of old programming languages that are considered like ancient scripts. They're no longer taught, have outdated documentation, and the learning curve is incredibly steep. Systems like old banking software written decades ago still need support. The number of people familiar with that code is diminishing over time. Time keeps moving relentlessly. However, this is where AI comes in and manages. It will likely perform very well here with the help of the pseudocode we mentioned earlier, or through transcriptions from other languages to the old one. We can still support such software thanks to this.
Exactly. In the example you mentioned, COBOL still runs on mainframes in banks. There's practically no documentation for it anywhere, and nobody knows how it works. It's not just about maintaining it and keeping it operational, but even about how to rewrite it into something newer. So, we can use AI to tell us what a certain piece of code does. Based on what the code does, we can then move it to another step and ask to generate test cases. With those test cases, we can proceed to the next step, asking AI to generate Python code, for example, for that particular task. This way, we can gradually transition from an old, obsolete programming language to something newer.
I'm trying my best not to burst out laughing because it's just like in my project. There's no documentation, nobody knows what's going on, and even the AI is like, I have no clue, sorry dude.
Sometimes it's the case that even AI throws its hands up, because as you mentioned at the beginning, the larger and more complex the project, the harder it is for AI to grasp the entire context. Here, we're hoping that GitHub Copilot X, as promised by its creators, will capture a much broader context. And in that case, in my opinion, if the project is truly large, AI will be much better at grasping that context and proposing appropriate solutions. It will be much easier for AI to search through information, notice dependencies between different parts of the application, and suggest the right solutions.
It's not new that a computer has more computational power than a human brain. Compared to a computer, the brain is like a snail on a unicycle. But it just struck me that someday documentation might look like this. We won't write documentation anymore. AI will be attached to every project. We'll just directly ask how to do something, how to run it, how something works. I think solutions like this might come from GitHub Copilot X, but we'll see.
All right, Adrian. Let's try to sum it all up and answer the question again. Should we, as programmers, be afraid of AI?
I have to admit, my response to the initial thesis was a bit of a bait, because whether programmers should be afraid, I think afraid is not the right word. We shouldn't look at AI in terms of whether it will take our jobs or not, but in terms of something that can improve our work, allowing us to focus on other things. I believe AI should be seen as another tool that can change our work. For example, as I mentioned earlier, modern IDEs. Once we had to write code in a terminal without those super editors, syntax highlighting, compilers, and so on. Similarly, Docker, which can significantly speed up our work, NPM, and so on and so on. There are plenty of these tools. Did they revolutionize our work? Perhaps collectively, I think AI will simply join these tools, greatly improving our work. Undoubtedly, work will change and look a bit different. Should we be afraid of AI? No, we should adapt to the new rules of the game.
Exactly, we shouldn't be afraid, but rather prepare for what's coming. Utilize this potential to make our work easier, faster, and better, so that we can focus on what truly matters. Thank you, Adrian, for this conversation, and see you soon.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.